I'm going to read from some new work. This is called The Pain of Others. New squirrel, fluffy and learning, jumps from the roof to a tree. Mother demonstrates, and with squeals of fear or joy, the baby takes flight. Everyone watches from the breakfast nook's picture window just for this. Enthralled, the 80-year-old, the 9-year-old, one who only speaks Spanish, one who picked crops as a 5-year-old. Everyone is in love with the tiny squirrel. It doesn't end like you want it to, a friend says to me. A hawk came from nowhere and took the baby. The mother jumped on the hawk's back, but was no match for it. My friend and I dig holes for plants, Sweet William, hydrangea, lavender. The dogs circle us, loving the herbs we add, the new soil. We toss rocks that they run and collect like tennis balls. Our hands are slow with the sorrow of the baby squirrel. Afterwards, she tells me, the mother ran in circles, crying and looking for her baby. This same day, there are 4 mass shootings, faces of the dead in thumbnail squares on the news. Today, I am imagining what it is to be in flight, new flight, and to be speared and taken from my mother. In everything we eat for breakfast, buttered toast, juice with pulp, tea in a hand-painted cup, in all of this, the exquisite pain of others, of spiders, squirrels, of shoppers and worshipers, of all who are learning to fly, and of air that holds their innocence, while also holding the hawk and its murderous talons like a lover. The sky is mute and blue. We water flowers. In the kitchen sink, I wash this earth from my hands.
Welcome to another episode of Poets in Montana. I'm Mark Gibbons, and today I'm talking with Mary Jane Nealon, who you just heard read The Pain of Others. Thank you, Mary Jane. Welcome to the party.
Thank you, Mark.
I'm glad you could be here. What an interesting poem. What you managed to go after almost everything in the poem that seems to be going after worthy. It's a metaphor for everything in a way, and it's the reality of everything at the same time. Especially on the heels of a couple of things that just go off. If you pay any attention at any time to anything going off in the news, the 2 incidents that happened yesterday or the day before, yeah, the pain of others.
Yeah, I know. I lived in Charlottesville. It was one of the first places I lived as a young person. And I've said to somebody, I love Charlottesville. It just felt like such a perfect little town. So that idea that like we're safe anywhere, it's just not true. And I think something about the pandemic made me really hyper aware of insects and who was in my yard and what time of day they came and if they looked hungry. Like there was just an attention that I had not really paid before, you know?
Right. I in the last one of these, I just spoke to the last poet I spoke to in one of these was reading, Robert Wrigley was reading poems about animals and having the same sort of comment about the pandemic, as well as about, coming upon dead animals and then our normal human reaction of seeing ourselves in that situation,
Yeah.
and understanding what it's like, or trying to understand what it's like to be another. And you have, I mean, I know that in terms of your bio, you went to Warren Wilson and got an MFA, correct?
I did when I was, much older. I was about 45 and I never had a bachelor's, but I went to nursing school. So I had a nursing diploma.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got 2 fellowships at the Fine Arts Work Center in Provincetown. And somebody up there said to me, this is a postgraduate fellowship. Why don't you just apply for an MFA without your bachelor's? And So I did. And so it more was to just get the thing. I wasn't going to teach. I just wanted to have it, you
Right,
know?
right. Yeah, as a little label that says not only is she an excellent nurse, but she can write a damn good poem. Yeah,
Who said that? Who
I
said
just did. You know.
Oh.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, exactly. So that's interesting. We kind of had similar trajectories in a way. Not that I mean, I guess I mean, I've been involved in teaching all of my life, so I guess that's definitely a service. Also, I don't know if it steps quite as high as the standard of nursing, but that's amazing the work that you've done. And I think in your first book.
Yeah.
This book, Rogue Apostle, many of these poems, yeah, are filled with those experiences.
Yeah, my father really taught us that service was necessary for a good life. It was his belief. And he also believed you should have a job where they would still need you in a war or a depression. So there were not a lot of options, cops, firefighter, nurses. Um, but I really credit him with giving me that entryway into a way to look at the world that really felt like a gift over and over again, to be present for real, experiences. And um, I'll just plug national service. Like, I really believe in it. I think it just makes you aware pretty early on. I worked on the Navajo reservation
Mhm.
when I was young. I really didn't understand poverty in this country until I did that. I was like, oh, no potable water? Right? Like, that's a different kind of poor than the poor I grew up around.
Right, right.
So,
Yeah, and I mean, every year, I always have the same idea or embrace the same concept in my head when it comes to Veterans Day and these days where Memorial Day. It's always usually a day that we've chosen to celebrate in honor of military service that people have given to their country, and that's wonderful that people volunteer to do military service in our country, particularly in those drastic times of when it's so necessary. But what about all the other people doing service, magnanimous service constantly in our country? And I just thought to myself, the idea of a draft for service on some level would be just a compulsory service for everybody once you get out of whatever level of schooling we're going to give people. And yeah, I think that'd be a great idea.
yeah, I mean, you could trade it for public education, right? If I graduate high school, lots of kids don't know what they want to study. You do 2 years of some kind of service
Mhm.
somewhere else, maybe than your community, so you get to like think about the rest of the country, and then you get 2 years paid of college. And if you want to do more, you do more service, and then that wipes out the whole student loan business.
Right.
So, but nobody's asking me. But
Well,
that's my thought.
well, exactly. And those people that don't want to, give anything. Well, you're not giving anything if people are working for it. If you're
That's right.
if you're putting in
Yeah.
the time and the hours. So by God, read us a service poem. I know you've got a bunch of them in Rogue Apostle or a nursing poem of some kind. Many
Okay.
of them I know written during the AIDS crisis.
Yeah, it's funny. This just opened up. Watching the solar eclipse with AIDS patients in infectious disease clinic, May 10th, 1994. To save our retinas, we slip your x-rays from the film jacket. Your entire radiographic history is here. We choose the most recent picture of your chest, the one with dense, patchy infiltrates, the one where, having failed to remove your gold chain, a small cross is suspended among rib bones. We line up take turns passing the protective slice of film back and forth. At the moment when the moon pauses at the center of the sun, it has the same heavy black nucleus as the virus. The ordinary slides out of sight. Soon the drama has passed, the moon edging its way along. We are tired of the way death has waited. It lays its meticulous hand on the young man with tall stalks of heliconia across his knees, tulips for all of us in his arms. Oh, I remember that day.
Yeah,
That's the,
I'm guessing that so many of your poems are uh, not filled with as much imagination as they are recollection.
yeah, I think one regret I have is that I never kept a journal.
Mm-hmm.
And as I got old, because when I was young, everything really stuck with me. Like I can remember patients from 1976, lots of details about them.
Right.
But then when I worked in the flop houses in New York, which was probably the really pivotal thing that made me most committed to social justice. Before I was really committed to good care, but that experience, and I didn't keep a journal during that time because I was so sure I would remember everything, and I don't. I remember some people and some circumstances, but I wish I had written down more. So he's been dead more than 25 years. So I can say the minute I read that, I was like, that was Rodney Knowles sitting in the waiting room with all those flowers for us. So he used to go to the flower market. So it's really like a gift to myself to put that stuff down.
Yeah, yeah. Well, in terms of, excuse me, in terms of poetry, I mean, you were early on, you knew you were going to do some kind of service, and your dad gave you that gift. What about poetry? When did that sort of come into your?
Yeah, it's funny. Well, my father is like one of the most, if not the most important person in my life.
Mhm.
So I did go to Catholic school, and we had a thing called the Seton Poetry Book. And every grade, from first through eighth grade, first day of school, you got a new book of poems for that age, and you had to memorize. So part of it was school. But when I was 10 years old, my father brought home a 5-color notebook and said, here, write something down. And I remember it was in the summer. I remember sitting outside and writing the alphabet across the top of the first page so that I could rhyme, ball, call, doll, fall, and writing poems. And then my father has been the gifter of my writing machine. So in eighth grade, he brought home an old typewriter from the police department, and I still have the piece of yellow paper he put in there and typed, I don't want any nonsense over this machine. I can always take it back. And then he gave me my first electric typewriter when I graduated high school, my first computer. And so, that's always been kind of, he's always pushed. Plus, we were all readers in my family.
Yeah.
We just, a lot of kind of characters in books were people we would just talk about like they were real.
Yeah.
And even on my father's deathbed, he made some comment. He said, I think Molly Bloom said that once when she was on the toilet. So,
How many siblings?
well, my brother who passed, and then my sister who's older than I am. And we're very close. So.
And your your brother that passed was young. And that was a significant moment in your life, as it would be in anyone's life.
Yeah. Yeah, we were very close, and he was 15 when he was diagnosed, and then he was 19 when he died, 19 in a couple of months. So his friends are still close to us, and he had a big impact on the people around him. He had a very strong faith. And it's a huge loss. But when families suffer a loss like that, if they don't fall apart, then I think they become like we became closer than I think we might have if he had lived and had an ordinary life.
Yeah.
It really forced us all to confront everything we felt together.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and all of a sudden, life becomes way more precious than it ever was before.
E- Exactly.
Yeah.
And when I did this thing. So nurses used to never apply for a job. I think I was 40 something when I applied for my first job because nurse recruiters were a real thing. You would go to a recruitment office and they tell you what they could do for you
Mm.
if you would work with them because people were desperate. So when my brother was in the cancer hospital, I went upstairs to the nurse recruitment office and asked for a job because I knew they had housing across the street. And I figured then I could be really close to him.
Mhm.
And you would think at some point they would say, well, this might not be a good idea, to work in this thing, but they didn't. They gave me a job, they gave me an apartment. And I worked with young adults with cancer, like leukemia, lymphoma. So after my brother died, I found myself like giving care to people who looked like him, who were having the same life experience.
Yeah.
And I think that turned out to be a really big gift for me. So, like when AIDS hit and young people were dying, it felt really familiar to me. It felt like, oh, I know what to do. I know how to talk to people in this circumstance.
Right. What
So that was his kind of gift to us, I think,
year did he pass?
1977,
Okay.
December. So almost 78. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and what the second book, your second book, where is it? Immaculate Fuel. This particular book,
Yeah.
that is this book dedicated to your brother, or does it have anything to do with that?
Well, it's dedicated to my sister and her partner.
Okay.
Um, but a lot of people thought about my brother because of the cover, even though it's not him. It was a painting that my publisher had in her office that I loved. But Mark, when I was 25, I wrote this poem about my brother. I typed it. I was typing on blue typewriter paper for some reason. And I said to somebody, I think this is the last poem I'll write about my brother.
Hmm.
I'm still writing about my brother,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
they don't stop.
Want to share one?
Sure. Well, if I could read a poem that's not actually about my brother, but it took place in the cancer hospital. It's a little bit long. It's Human-Headed Bull Below Empty Space.
We would love to hear it.
Um, I love this poem because I wanted to write it many, many, many years earlier. And then from this image, and then finally, when I was in my 40s, somebody told me a story. And as they were telling me the story, I thought, I know how to write that poem. And I literally ran to a computer lab because I was on campus.
Mhm.
And this came out in like 15 minutes. So I'm going to read this poem. It's in two parts, and it is called Human-Headed Bull Below Empty Space. 1. On the lapis cylinders from 2900 BC, images of the domestic and the wild wrestle demons and musical instruments. A human-headed bull braces a dulcimer while a bear plays and a fox nestles at their feet. From my life, one scene inscribed like that. So for 20 years, a girl appears and reappears in dreams. I am a young nurse, crisp uniform, high polished shoes, carrying specimens that must be dropped off when, in the late after hours of a cancer center, I get turned around. I am lost somewhere in radiology. In each darkened room, huge machinery and radioactive danger signs. Just minutes before, on the ward where I worked, I massaged the feet of a boy with testicular cancer. I rubbed his arch. and on a sketch pad he drew my hands with charcoal, precise lines he smeared with his thumb. You know, I just thought I was bigger than the other boys in gym class, he said, and added his own feet to the drawing of my hands. Now the night has stopped itself in this hall, and in my memory of him, the air is all enormous cathedral. I turn left and see a girl whose back is to me, standing before the new ultra-modern scanner, alone, arms outstretched, her blue and white striped hospital robe, too large for her shoulders, has fallen, and her hair, which I know will soon fall out, is luscious and just barely reaches her hip. I watch her for how beautiful she is, for how faithful she is to her position there, her arms held exactly, for how she could be anyone, for how she could be me. The technician arrives, directs me, directs her, and I resume the pace of someone found. Some nights I dream I am photographing her or painting her, and now that I have seen the treasures of I dream I am carving her body onto a lapis cylinder, then rolling her onto parchment. She is my link to a moment still before me in my life, before I had cleaned the body of my father newly dead, a moment in which who I am is variable. I might have been the bear making music or the obedient human-headed bull supporting heavy strings. But I have been frozen again, mesmerized by my father's freckled skin as I turn him to place below him a clean sheet, one the funeral workers can take with them. I love the way his vacant mouth accepts his false teeth. I touch the black sores on both heels and the yellow tobacco-stained nails of his right hand. I carve the sight of him on my retina, roll him across my cornea, his arms, like hers, once reaching out, now folded. And I know, because I have never forgotten her, that this moment with him will last, just the two of us in the middle of the night before I call anyone to help. I sit down for a while, slide my hand under his, and watch. 2. Because now I have raised her up, because now I have laid him down. I tell her story to a friend who writes. Maybe he will want to take her, and I will be able to let go the responsibility of her fate, which has tracked me through the years like a lion, or the boy whose testicular tumor grew to incorporate his brain. Instead, my friend tells me his vision, a night when he watched a dog from his city window, framed by the building's edge and the alley's long line, light from an unknown source, moon maybe, street light. This dog, curled, was reduced to form, his head and tail equal and still. He remembers. I remember. The dog, as girl, as my father, as a boy, as witness. Obedience and repose. My father is a dog, a girl, a boy, a human-headed bull falling below empty space. And it occurs to me that it is this which held us. This is what haunts, how we both saw for a moment the empty space we are destined to fall through.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Beautiful poem. And it makes me think somewhat about you referred to the fact that you were raised a Catholic, and are you still a member of the church or any of that?
No, I don't. I'm very spiritual person,
Yeah.
but I don't actually believe in any organized religion, dogma. I feel very grateful to my Catholic education, especially exposure to the Jesuits, because they drove home social justice. And to me, that's like, you know, just take some action. Like, you know, when people, what's the word, when you're kind of preaching, you know, it's like, oh, just, you know, go to the food bank for 2 hours. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
just
do
just
something.
take some action.
Yeah,
You know,
do something. Yeah, yeah. help out.
Yeah.
I, I was someone had just mentioned to me that there was a particular Catholic priest who's a poet who was supposedly going to be here soon to give some kind of a reading.
Oh,
And I think over at I shouldn't say because I know exactly this is not going to matter for this anyway, but it's one of the churches here in town. And I thought, well, I don't know if I want because of all the dogma related sort of stuff that I'm not necessarily into. But then I heard the man, and it's to even talk about it's ridiculous when you don't know his name. But I heard him do a TED Talk thing, and it was just super, super thoughtful, interesting, very intelligent, very deeply perceptive human being. And I thought, yeah, there's a lot in common there. There's no all priests should be poets, and vice versa.
yeah, yeah. And it was actually a Jesuit in the 1600s, Father Puente. Up until Father Puente, Jesuits priests were expected to meditate every day on the crucifixion. Mm. And then that was their meditation. And he was the first person who said, it doesn't matter what you meditate on. Mm-hmm. If you look at a dandelion for hours, it'll bring you to Christ. Mm-hmm. And there are, I think, the rituals in the Catholic Church, a lot of the stories of saints, like I'm still really connected to that imagery. Mm-hmm. But I just get nervous about it. It's sort of a crapshoot who the priest is, whether it's going to be someone with an open mind or not. I mean, yeah. My mother was very religious, but she said to me, don't forget, a priest is just a man.
Yeah.
So,
right.
Yeah.
And the church is a potential corporation at any given moment.
Exactly.
Well, is there anything else off the top of your head, a poem that you would like to share with us at the moment, or?
It's new, but I would love to read the poem for Harold, the bull that was poached on the bison range, yes. Because I wrote this poem months earlier. And when I met Harold, and I hope I can not have emotion when I think about it, I was with my dogs and he was very close to us. I turned around, he was right on the other side of one of those very low fences. And and it felt like a sacred experience. And so when I heard that he was poached, I was devastated, and I thought if I could mention him in this record, I would feel good about that.
Yeah. Did they have an estimate on how old they thought Harold was?
No, I was talking to somebody about it because I guess the points on their antlers represent age. He had about 16 points. He had a couple that were broken, but somebody said to me, well, is it 8 years then? Because most of the elk there, they said, lived to be about 4 or 5. So I don't know, but he was quite grand and powerful. So this is called, sorry?
We'd love to hear the Harold poem.
Oh, thank you. When our souls and animals meet. The government returns the bison range to the tribes, and a giant bull elk takes over the picnic area. People start to call him Harold. Sacred space. Friends tweet, saw a herd with newborn calves. Flies are bad. A black bear crossed the Alexander Basin. Many antelope today. Saw Harold. I grew up in Jersey City and leaned against brick buildings. The leaning made for good kisses, bodies close. Harold is as large as that tenement. I want to lean against his pale criminy mushroom coat, touch his dark brown hood, but it is fighting season, and antlers, once velvet, are as sharp as a chef's knife. Elders suggest stillness. My dogs are savvy. They sit. Behind Harold, a flicker splits its orange wings. In rut, Harold's great throat groans out a call for another, bugle of need that is also a sign of strength. His anguish rouses mine. Once, right after my brother died, I took a road trip. I saw a bear along the river in Taos. I was alone and did everything wrong, ran the path to the car, my hair flying behind me. My brother didn't live to 20. Today, in high grass, Harold presents his antlers. I count his many points, his many years. I understand however long I live, I will die with words on my fingertips, with grief on my lips.
Nice. Thank
Thank you.
you. Yeah, that's a beautiful poem. Yeah, it's hard to figure out stuff like that. Why anybody would, do such a thing.
Well, I always assume somebody's willing to pay for it and that's what drives it, right? So, but I hate to say this, but I kind of hope they're haunted by him, because he had, like I said to somebody once, yeah, whales and elephants are my gods. And they were like, whatever. But I meant it. And that's how I felt in Harold's presence, like just a power that was bigger than human power. So
Yeah,
anyway,
and a spirit.
he had a powerful spirit. Yeah. And they said that he was a fierce fighter during Rut, but that he was known for going off alone to recover. And, that just felt to me like mythic, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
anyway, yeah.
Excuse me. Did you have any favorite poets that you always went to when you were younger and still do, or?
I did. I mean, I studied with Jean Valentine for years, 4 or 5 years, and made a group of women friends that we still meet every 2 weeks on Zoom. And we take a retreat every year together. The oldest one is 90 now. I was 21 when I met them, and they were like these hip older women. Now they're, still cool. But and then Galway Canal was important in my life for a lot of reasons. And I moved to Hawaii to study with him before he was kind of well known. And then Czesław Miłosz was really important to me. Delmore Schwartz, I have a little obsession with. I don't know if you know Delmore, but I have a great old tape recording of him reading. And, he was kind of a flop house guy.
Yeah.
When I was in the flop houses, that helped me really feel good about a lot of even though the people were really drunk and there were mice and lice and roaches, I kept trying to see the person because I knew Delmore had been in that environment.
Right.
Seamus Heaney was important to me. So yeah. And then I don't know if you know Alan Dugan's work.
I don't believe I do. No.
I loved Alan Dugan so much. And when I was at the Fine Arts Work Center in Provincetown, I got to know him. He had been kind of wild in his youth and then was not wild as he was older. But he was one of those people, he worked in a contraceptive factory. He did greeting cards. Like he was like a human of the world and really tied into all those beat poets and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say he felt kind of egoless to me. Like his poem books are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And just the most generous spirit, so yeah. Not a lot of women, which somebody pointed out to me recently. And I said, well, there weren't that many women like Jean Valentine, but there weren't that many women that were well established when I first started reading poetry.
Right.
So
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that was the way of the world. And then it's just over basically, our generation, and maybe the one just prior to us, that then all of a sudden women kind of came into the foreground and really kind of just kicked the doors off and sort of took over, I think.
Yeah.
It's like,
Is
boy,
that what it feels like?
hey, obviously, you ignored us for so long. Get the hell out of the way. It's like women have taken over, which is fine because they do an incredibly good job. But yeah, kind of seems like that to me.
Yeah, I wonder. Sandra Alcasser, I'm very close to here, and when she's home for the summer, we work together. So yeah, she's an important person in my poetry life. Yeah.
Yeah, we were able enough to grab her while she was here, and I don't know if she's still around now or she returned or
No,
not.
she's in San Diego.
Yeah,
Yeah, she's down in San Diego.
yeah.
So I keep trying to talk her into staying up here, but so far, I mean, her husband has no power to do that, so I certainly don't have that. Don't have that
Well,
power.
she still likes what she's doing, obviously.
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
teacher is a teacher. So what else? Another poem,
Mm,
another new one, new
sure.
one. And you mentioned earlier, while you're thinking about that, you mentioned earlier that you had sort of taken a bit of a pause or had been busy doing other kinds of writing for several years, and now you're really kind of getting back into it.
Yeah, I did, and I am going to be doing a big creative nonfiction project
Mhm,
pretty soon.
mhm.
I have about 400 pages of prose, of essays, kind of like lyric essays. Some of them have been published in the Sun. I'm just trying to figure out how to shape them.
Right.
I do love prose, and I think, the narrative poetry, they kind of, they're both stories to me, opportunities for storytelling. Um, but for some reason, a few years ago, I flipped back to poetry as like my first go-to.
Hmm.
For a number of years, I felt like I was struggling to write poems. I kept doing it, um, but yeah, I have a lot, and I have a new poetry manuscript that I'm just starting to send out, and that's where the new poems are from. So,
Great.
sometimes it feels like a useless effort, but once the work feels right, I'm most happy about that. If it gets published, great,
Yeah.
but it doesn't drive me to do that.
Yeah.
Well, um, I have this poem that was published in the Westchester Review this year, and they submitted it for Best of the Net because they're a digital magazine. And it really, for me, tells the story of like coming out here, the Paulus Hook,
Hmm.
New York waterway. Could I read that one?
Yeah. Yeah.
9/11. Paulus Hook Ferry, New York waterway, 9/11 to 9/19, 2001. My bedroom window faced the parking lot. I loved the order of its lines, meticulous parking to maximize space. The lot's selling point, proximity to the ferry. At the end of the first night, ash still fell on the river. 27 cars remained in the lot. I picked one, a white Lexus. Each morning, I had to pass National Guardsmen just to buy the Jersey Journal at the deli. Gradually, the lot was emptying. Please, please, someone come, I would say, pressing my head into my hands. Eighth day. A sheet of paper appeared under the wiper blades, a warning maybe that it would be towed. This place I had loved for its stunning view, for ducks in the harbor, the sugar factory's bronze facade, no matter. Now all I could see was this white car held between two yellow lines. Whoever you were today in sand at the Blackfoot River, I draw a circle around you and place in its center everything I carried of you across the country to the biggest sky, big enough to hold everything about that day as a speck. Now the sky's black clouds stir the tallest pines. They sway, but do not collapse. They sway, but do not disappear.
Nice. Yeah, that speaking of, I mean, we're always speaking of the pandemic, but because we're in the present, but that moment, that was a pivotal moment that changed everything. Just like this last couple of years is the same kind of an experience, it seems like.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, the difference about the pandemic, my sister and I talked about this a lot because she lived in Jersey City. We were on the water facing the towers,
Mhm.
like half a mile away. The ferry literally took 3 minutes to get over there. And they evacuated to the Jersey side. So she was in California on business and she was desperate to get back. She wound up taking the train back.
Mhm.
Um, and what we both experienced was this generosity of spirit across the whole country. I mean, I drove out here a couple months later in the winter across the Dakotas, and I felt like the American flags, the compassion, everything everywhere was like to support what happened in New York.
Mhm.
But the pandemic asked a sacrifice of everybody. And I think that's why it felt so different. Like that we didn't become united for a lot of reasons because there was a lot of bad messaging and all of that. But I think at its core, there was nobody that felt untouched and whole that could just be supportive. So everybody was like in their own challenge, whatever it was. Some obviously much bigger than others.
Right.
Um, so it felt very different to me. And the fact that I'd experienced the 9/11 thing really did make me, it made the lack of care of the people that were dying of COVID so much more dramatic, I think,
Yeah.
when we
Yeah.
compare the two.
Well, and of course, we were out here, so we were not close other than this whole media connection that we were just getting plugged into and at the 2001. But a lot of it too, a lot of the difference between the two was the whole military sort of reaction. I mean, I remember young people that were around me because we were a little bit older at that time and younger people than me because I had just gone through graduate school not too much before that, and with around young poets and whatnot who had a visceral, aggressive, defend America reaction, like they were willing to join up and do exactly the bidding of what the war machine decided to perpetrate in Iraq and going forward and Afghanistan. But this pandemic, I guess maybe the entrenched sort of polarization that had been going on for so long in this country that they've been working at for since the 80s, since back before AIDS. It's been
Yeah,
going on a long time. This has been sort of building, and then to just be able to turn your back on other people within your own community, within your own country, just appeared just was just mind-boggling. And
yeah,
so tragic. It seemed to me so. And in a way, because I was removed from 9/11, more tragic. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I collected New York Times headlines from about 2 weeks before COVID
Mhm.
and just collected the headlines that really moved me. And one of them was something like, "We don't want old people to die," or "Why do we want old people to die?" Or some, I forget what it was, but it was really powerful because that sense of like, oh, well, they're 80s, like, yeah, it was shocking. So, but 9/11, I mean, I saw it from my bedroom and I remember getting my sister on the phone in California, and I said, "It looks like there's a fire at the World Trade Center." Like, I was looking out my window because it was such a beautiful day, and I saw smoke from the top of the first tower. I hadn't seen the first plane. And we were saying things like, "How will the firefighters get up there?" And then she had the TV on in California and said, "They're saying a plane." And I said, "Oh, I could totally see that. It's such a beautiful day." I thought like a pilot was blinded.
Hmm.
But then as we were talking, the second plane came between, like, in front of where I was and turned into there was always this ribbon of glass from the atrium, and it looked like it was aiming right for that. And then my father was born on the island where the Statue of Liberty is. His father was in the army, and my grandmother was in a barracks house. And so I just suddenly, you could also see the Statue of Liberty from our patio. So I said, "Oh my God, what if they attack the Statue of Liberty?" And she goes, "Who cares? There's not going to be people there. Like, there's 50,000 people in the World Trade Center." But it was just this terrifying moment that, like, they could strike anywhere. I don't know how people in Ukraine are doing it, Mark.
Yeah.
Like, I know I'm totally off track now, but you
I,
can edit this out. Uh, I just can't even imagine what it would be like to live in that every day.
no, I know. I mean, to be able to put up with that level of stress and trauma and just heartbreak.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah, yeah, just devastating heartbreak. So read us a poem that's either going to break our goddamn hearts or lift us out of this.
I know. Do you know, I have to tell you, my father came to every poetry reading and he was crying at one. And we were driving home after the reading and he said to me, "You have a really good sense of humor. I wish you could put some of that into a poem."
Exactly.
So, well, this disco poem, it's not say it's funny, but it is like the lightest I probably get. And it's short, so I'll read that. Disco, 254 West 54th Street. Our danskin tights sent shocks through our thighs when we moved, lines of coke in boundaryless bathrooms. I'm not sure how I got in. I wasn't famous, though I held the hands of men who were: the Christie's auctioneer, a man from the Brazilian bank. Either way, Donna Summer was popular because a judgmental Christ wasn't living on her lips yet. AIDS hadn't happened yet. I danced with anyone who asked. A man in black tie died in an air vent trying to sneak in. There was crime in the subways. I never saw the moon then, or sunsets, or birds, though I guess they lived in Central Park. Skylab was falling, apocalyptic. I called the 19th precinct one night. "I see it," I said. I talked the desk sergeant into going outside. "I'm only 2 blocks from you," I said. I was on my terrace on the 21st floor, pointing up. "Honey, I think that's a star," he said. But then, in Western Australia, Skylab did fall. Large pieces with red paint, an oxygen tank, a hatch door. Fragments hit the roof of a tiny house in a town called Esperance.
Esperance. All right. Yes, very nice. You know, I'm going to ask you to read another one that's not a very long one. We have some time left, but we're getting close to the end, which I can't believe. And I mean, it just seems like we're just getting started. I could do this for another 2 hours, probably, just talking and visiting and listening to your poems. So read us another one if you've got one handy that you'd like to share.
Okay. Do you care if it's another new one? These
Oh,
just
no,
feel
heavens,
so old.
no.
So, because this does have a funny moment. It's called "Storm Come to Rest." All the while the son of Sam was killing, my brother was dying. Then the Yankee, Reggie Jackson, hit 3 home runs in a single game in the World Series, after which he came to the hospital and signed a ball for my brother. And my brother, afraid of nothing really, said thanks, but I'm a Mets fan. And Reggie Jackson loved that so much that for years after my brother died, he would mention him to the nurses when he came to visit other kids with cancer. My brother, that loss, that absence, shaped all the next moves, working at the cancer center where I released other young bodies to death. In grief, I traveled the country looking for solace, then back to New York to be baptized by AIDS, which fueled the grief so that I began drinking too much, sleeping too much, loving too many men, the kind of bad boys who never outgrow their wickedness, until eventually I find in this dry valley town where air inversions challenge my lungs and skin wrinkles early and hair even goes a little flat. Until then, when I find unexpectedly and somewhat late in life, happiness, the world itself in all its weathering, snow, vivid sun, morning chill, windows iced over, the house in wind, shaken, trees toppling, and in the fields, cows that turn into the wind and away from it, even blanketed horses cluster. In spring, sheep and their tiny lambs graze among delirious goats. This earth wiped all those early years clean, not of the radiance that was in them, not of small disappointments, just the largest of sorrows. At last, I understand my body and the life of my body, and that it really is a part of this earth. And so today, I am completely sated, for it has rained.
All right. Well, I think your dad would like that one.
Yeah.
Except he might lift an eyebrow or two early on.
No, he knew he was head of the vice squad, and I used to try to talk him into cocaine was a natural. It was a leaf, and the Peruvian farmers ate it. And he was like, look up their life expectancy. It was like 41.
Yeah.
So no, he was of the earth, of the world.
Yeah.
And when he died, Mark, he had a AAA map from Jersey City to Missoula. So my sister said either he thought you were going to go and he wanted to visit you, or he's telling you to go.
There you go.
So, yeah.
The old AAA maps that lined you out all the way with all the,
The
yeah,
triptychs,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Triptych. That's what
I
it was.
love those. I
Yeah.
love those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this has been an absolute delight. And I'm afraid that the curtain is going to come down. This is like perfect for you and your life choice. It's like triage, right? I mean,
Exactly.
you're in a war zone or something almost. But one more to go out the door, and I don't. I looked at these the ones in Rogue Apostle. They're like serious business. Most of these babies are flat out serious poems, but and they're just incredibly good and powerful. If do you want to choose something from there to go out on, or
Sure. I have to say, I do think it's my better book, and I haven't read it in a while, but sure. Um, well, um, what was the? I'm sorry.
when the
Find it.
one of the more visceral ones that struck me was a motorcycle accident in New Mexico. That was just a
Okay, I just opened to that. I remember that girl like it was yesterday. So, motorcycle accident, New Mexico. When the fender of the Buick takes your leg, it takes it at the hip. A disarticulation, we call it. All the leg, including the round ball of femur that fits into the smooth hip joint. You are my age, with my hair, my coloring. Because we have no way to close the wound in the emergency room, and because it will take some time to prepare the OR, I have my gloves in balls of sterile gauze shoved into the hole. You drift in and out, my latex hands soaked in your blood. Once you rouse and say, my leg must be bad. It hurts so much. Broken, isn't it? Later that night, I saw your leg on a gurney in the morgue. Tan, a torn ankle sock, blanched veins behind the knee. Even though the nightmares when they come are selfish, my legs mangled, I'm running from the wolves. It is the feel of my fist in your socket, in your bone pocket, hard place of intimate pressing to save your life. It is that sensation, a kind of traumatic marriage that I wake to 14 years later, my fist asleep, my neck stiff, just the way it felt, leaning into your body then. So when I do wake in September of this year, warm rain like spots of your blood on my forearm, I think about your split body, craggy, torn, the strange love I had for you. Fragile skin, hefty bone that separates, then gathers us to rescue one another. What my life has come to, the salvation of cornea and limbs, my hands emancipated in the mess of it.
Wonderful. What a good poem to end on.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much.
And this
Having all these memories now of these people, which is wonderful.
yeah. Well, they're great poems. I'm glad to know that there's another manuscript on the horizon. And I know the guillotine is above us and ready to drop at any second.
Yeah. Okay.
Mary Jane Nealon, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. It's wonderful to see you.
Good to see you. We'll see you all next time with another poet in Montana.
Got a lifetime filled